This morning I've decided to do the upload on following distances. It looks like it's trying to rain, so this might be a combined what your following distance should be in the dry and what your following distance should be in the wet, which is good news. Although it does mean that the camera might be a little bit spotty with the rain. One of the most common faults that we see is people tailgating the cars in front or not leaving an appropriate following distance. And this is because they've got themselves into bad habits whilst they've been driving the car or riding their own 125 motorbikes. Occasionally we see terrible following distances where it's quite frightening how close the students are following the cars in front, so do be mindful of your following distances. Ask yourself, would you be able to stop if the car in front or the vehicle in front braked suddenly? And if you are too close to somebody, you're unlikely to be able to see the hazard in front of the vehicle that they're about to brake for. There's two problems with following vehicles too closely. Firstly, you can't stop in time if they suddenly need to brake. Secondly, your forward planning is much reduced by the fact that you just can't see in front of that vehicle as easily as if you were dropped back from them and could see around the vehicle. That also includes planning for your road surface. So if you're up the back side of a vehicle, it's very, very difficult for you to see the road surface directly in front of the vehicle in the middle of the lane. If the car tyres go into a pothole, you'll see the tyres go into the pothole because the car suspension will react. But if there's debris in the middle of the lane and you're following a vehicle too closely, you're not going to see the debris until you're on the debris. I nearly ran over a brick like that once because I was following a vehicle too closely, didn't see the brick, and then it was almost too late for me to avoid it. Remember, the general rule for following distances is 2 seconds. And with your 2 seconds, you choose a stationary object at the side of the road, like a road sign or a tree or a lamppost. When the vehicle in front passes that object, you start saying to yourself, only a fool breaks the 2 second rule. If you've passed the stationary object at the side of the road before you finish saying your phrase, then you're too close. If you finish saying the phrase and then you pass the stationary object at the side of the road, then you're a good distance back. And that's for when the road surface is dry. If the road surface is wet, the highway code recommends doubling that, so say it twice. Personally, on a bike, I'd rather stay a little bit further back so that I've got all the opportunity and time to forward plan. It's good to be able to see around the vehicles. It's good to be able to plan for your road surface and to plan for any hazards. If you're too close to the vehicle in front, you're depriving yourself of the opportunity to be able to plan. You're making it more difficult for yourself to deal with hazards when they arise. And you're increasing the likelihood that you will go into the back of the vehicle if it does an emergency stop. It's now quite wet. The surface is getting a little wetter. So my following distances are now going to start increasing. And my planning's also going to increase, so I'm allowing myself more time for slowing down, which is why we increase our following distances in the wet, because we want to be braking more smoothly and taking more time over it, so even more gently than normal, and allowing ourselves to bring our speed down a little bit more for those corners as well, because your bends and turn speeds are going to be slightly less. Related to your following distances are your following distance when moving off in slow moving traffic. So when you're in a queue and the queue starts to move ahead in front of you, you'll often see students chasing the car in front and not allowing a stopping distance to develop. Once you've done your shoulder checks, let the car in front start to move before you then start to move. I don't mean wait, I just mean move with the car, but allow the stopping distance to develop. Don't chase the vehicle in front of you. And I think this comes from car driving, where people just naturally follow a little bit too closely a lot of the time, like the van behind me, for example. I can actually hear his engine rattling. He's that close. So we're letting the van accelerate. I'm matching his speed whilst allowing my stopping distance to develop. I'm now at a good distance where I can see both of his mirrors. And I've matched his speed, so I'm not dawdling, so the car behind isn't getting up my backside. I've just allowed myself a good distance. So if he does want to slow down and turn, I can deal with it. The rain is increasing now, so my stopping distances are going to start to increase as well. And even though the van isn't getting up to speed, he's being quite slow about his acceleration, so I suspect he's got some heavy things in that van, or he's looking for somewhere to turn. That's going to be my next one. That still doesn't mean we get up the back side of the van, because he's not getting up to the speed limit. You have to ask yourself, why is the vehicle in front of me not getting themselves up to the speed limit? They've either got a good reason for it, so they've got less acceleration than normal, or they're looking for a turning, or they're distracted. Giving them more space is far more sensible than getting too close to the vehicle and then finding that they are distracted or they are about to turn, and then you realise you're too close to be able to deal with it safely or sensibly. When you're following a van, remember to try and stay far enough back you can see both their mirrors. So I can see both their mirrors at the moment. And again, that allows you to see around the van and to forward plan. I can still see both mirrors of this van at 20 miles an hour. I can still see around the van quite easily, which is allowing me to plan ahead rather than only being able to plan as far forwards as the van. And again, when you're joining the back of a queue, don't get right up the back side of the vehicles. Leave yourself the distance you'd normally leave if the vehicle started to move again. Or if they were stopping, you wouldn't be getting any closer than you'd be getting if you had to stop with them. Often we'll see students racing towards the back of a queue, only to land much too closely to the back of the queue, and then not allow a stopping distance to develop as the queue starts to move off. If you're being tailgated, one of the safest things that you can do is to increase your own following distance with the car in front. This allows you to accommodate for the fact that the car behind won't be able to brake as effectively as you will. You'll be able to use the space in front of you, the increased space, to do your braking a little more slowly and gently, rather than having to hammer your brakes on and hope the car behind doesn't go up your backside as you're stopping. So if you increase the distance between you and the vehicle in front, you're allowing yourself more time to react, and you're effectively allowing yourself to slow the car behind you down in a safer manner. By increasing the distance between you and the vehicle in front, there is always the argument that the car behind will get even more frustrated because they'll think that you're dawdling, even though you're not. You're matching the speed of the vehicle in front. You've just increased your distance from that car or vehicle. And there's the possibility that they might go for a dangerous overtake to try and get into that gap. So if you increase the distance in front of you, keep a good eye on your mirrors and just watch and see if the car behind is likely to do anything daft. Quite clearly they're not a particularly good driver if they're tailgating you anyway. So be prepared for them to do something silly. Your other alternative is to pull over and let the impatient car get past you, and then you can carry on with your journey without the fear of the car getting up your backside again. Staying a good distance back is to do with good forward planning. If you're watching ahead and you're anticipating the car in front slowing down for hazards, you shouldn't ever be getting too close to the car. It's quite common for students not to be planning far enough ahead and anticipating vehicles slowing down in front of them, especially if they're at the beginning of their training journey with us. The more lessons they have, the better they become with their forward planning, and the less likely they are to get up the backside of vehicles. Another common fault we see with following distances is when waiting for an overtake, people wait too closely to the vehicle in front, whether it's a cyclist or a tractor, and they sit in that position too close for too long before it's actually safe to overtake. So try to judge when it's going to be sensible to move closer to the vehicle. You do need to close in on the vehicle a little bit just before you do your overtake, so that it doesn't take you as long to overtake. But try to avoid tailgating prior to an overtake, in case the vehicle does something unexpected, like suddenly decides they want to turn left or right or stop on the side of the road. Also think about your position when you're waiting to overtake as well. Some people sit out wide in position 3 whilst there's oncoming traffic. We wouldn't normally sit in position 3 for normal riding, so if you're waiting to do an overtake, don't sit in position 3, sit in 2 when there's oncoming traffic, because it's safer. So let's check the following distance using this traffic island that's coming up on the right. When the black car passes it, only a fool breaks the 2-second rule. So I'm about 2.5 seconds at the moment behind the vehicle, which is okay because the roads are slightly damp. They're not very wet, it's only just started to rain. Let's try again. Only a fool breaks the 2-second rule. Yeah, we're good. So I'm still about 2.5 seconds. If I'd passed the traffic island before I'd finished saying the phrase, then I'd be too close. And if it gets much wetter than this, I'll be dropping back and leaving myself more space so that I can safely bring the bike to a smooth stop. Remember, when moving off in traffic, allow the vehicle in front to get away from you. Don't be too close to them. There's my student on test. And by staying back, I can see nicely up the road. I can already see the Asda van. I can see further ahead up the road and beyond. So planning for those hazards. I much prefer to stay further back from the vehicles in front so that I can plan ahead. I can also relax a little bit more because I've allowed myself a bit more time to be able to plan. So if I do miss something, I've got more time to be able to deal with it. Nobody's perfect when they're riding, but if you're too close to the vehicles in front, you're going to make it far harder for yourself to be able to plan ahead and deal with any hazards that might develop.